So we are ready to start lab 8, but labs 1 through 7 are the material for the first test. So I'd like to give that probably next week. So either Wednesday of next week or the following Monday. So I want to know your other major exams coming up, so I can try to spread these things out. So let me know that. All right. We're going to start new material, Flask. So we worked at the terminal. We were coding we were doing sort of like a terminal kind of coding. And then we did a little bit of tkinter. We made like a desktop interface, and it didn't look so hot, and we didn't worry too much about it. And now we're going to start doing like a web interfacing thing. And we're going to introduce Flask, which is sort of a library for helping us manage that. There's another sort of larger, more utilized library, the Django. I think next week I'll give you a video that talks about a comparison of the two. I chose Flask because it's more small scale, and that's what we're doing, small scale stuff. It makes you sort of more aware of what you're doing, whereas the Django, you sort of bring everything but the kitchen sink in like from the start. So in a commercial arena, that might be the right thing to do. And that's when you read this, when you watch some video that I give you for homework, you're going to say you chose the wrong one. And that's a fair assessment, because if you think about me getting you ready purely for a job, that it's used more in industry, but this is the one that makes you understand what you're doing more. So it's a pedagogical choice. But if you want to tell me I'm wrong, then that's fine. I will accept that. Okay. Whoa. Oh my God. They must have a business class before this or something. I don't know. All right. So I'm going to start Flask. We have some setup to do for Flask, but I asked before that if you have any questions on other things before we start doing something new. Answer is no. All right. So this first document is sort of setting up Flask and running the hello world. And I'm going to do it more or less demo-y. So there's a video. In the video, all you Mac lovers will like it because the guy's installing it on a Mac. I'm going to install, of course, on Windows. So I'm going to open up code. I have a 341. Within 341, I'm going to make a Flask folder for my Flask stuff. And I'm going to move into there on my command line. So my command line is right now in downloads, and I want to be in documents in 341 in Flask. So I'm going to do some CD. I'm going to move around on the command line here, and the command is CD. You can put in the path you want to go to, starting with a C. So you can put in put in what we call a full path. C : /user /blum /documents /C341 /Flask. So I can go for the full thing. That's one approach. Or I can move around by saying CD ... that moves me up a level in the tree. So now I'm up out of the Flask folder. I'm up out of the 341 folder. Now I'm in documents. So you can either do a full path starting with C:, if you are on your happy little Macs, then no C:, but if you start with a /, that's the root. If I want to move around relative to where I am, then I'm in documents and I want to go into C341. And if I want to go from there into Flask, I have to spell it right, Flask. So that's our first step, is to just figure out where we're going to work and get ourselves on the terminal into the right place. And then I'm going to type a command there. That's this command. Let me make it at least a little bit bigger here. So now I'm ready to run a command, Python -m venv. venv stands for virtual environment. And I'm going to, and one of them is to make a virtual environment, and the other one is I'm calling the virtual environment. So that's what people usually do. Spell it right. -m venv. So making a virtual environment. And the purpose of a virtual environment is to make a small section of your computer where you can, like if you had different versions of Python, you were worried about what would happen if you were making some code and you wanted to distribute it. What if people had different libraries? What if people had different versions of Python? So usually they suggest when you start doing something as sort of sophisticated as Flask, they usually say make a virtual environment, so that anything that you install Flask-wise is in your virtual environment and not in your full environment. Okay, so it's like a sectioning off of a part of your computer, sort of for testing purposes or from protection from other things. So there we go. Now I'm going to open up the folder here, and I'm going to try to find that folder. So that was in documents. So again, I went to File, Open Folder, and I'm finding that folder, Documents 341 Flask venv. And I'm going to say I trust. Okay. So here is the venv, and it made some subfolders, include lib, scripts. It made a configuration file. So that's what that command did. So in Flask, it made this venv folder. It made these subfolders. It added a configuration file. Okay. And so that's what that did. Okay. And now the next thing I want to do is to activate my virtual environment. And so under scripts, there are these activates, and there are different ones. There's a batch. I think that's maybe an exe. Here's a little. Let me look here. And let me go to control panel and show my types. control panel, file explorer options, view, don't hide hide the extensions, uncheck it, so I'm not hiding them. And that didn't show. Okay. So I don't know what this one is. It just says activate. This one is a batch file. This one's a PowerShell file. And I'm going to get back my terminal. I lost my terminal. There it is. My terminal's at the venv. At the venv, there's a scripts folder, and then there's an activate. So I'm going to say within the scripts folder, I'm going to say run activate. And it's probably going to fail. Let me see. It's failing for me because it tried to run the PowerShell version, the PS1 version of Activate. And I need a security setting in PowerShell. So this is like, if you're not going to see this if you're a Mac person, but this is what happens in the lab. And if you're in a lab, I sort of ran around and did this last night on the computers in this lab, except this one. So you'll have to tell them, I don't think you'll need to do it because I did it, but if you're over there in the lab, for instance, you may need me to do it or somebody from IT with some permission. Okay. But I need to do something in PowerShell, so I'm going to search for PowerShell. And this is like a once to set up, and then we'll never do it again. So that's spelled PowerShell, right? So here's PowerShell. I like the integrated shell environment here, so I'm going to run that as administrator. Again, fortunately, this is like for a given computer, this is a one-off. If you're like me and you're at different computers all the time, then you have to do it sort of for each computer. But I want to set the execution policy, and I'm going to give it a value of what's known as remote signed. So that just gives me permissions to run more scripts. So it gives you a very strict policy. I'm lightening up the policy. And so I said, set the execution policy, and I said yes to all. So I should be done with PowerShell. And let me run that command again, activate. And there it is. So now there's this little venv in green in the front. So I have now got my virtual environment and it's activated. And if you're in Mac, then you won't have, it won't have scripts, it will have bin. You probably won't run into anything about PowerShell because that's not usually a Mac sort of thing. I think there might be a PowerShell version that runs on Mac, but I don't know that they use it the way Windows does. Okay. Here's me saying the PowerShell thing and the remote signed. Here's my screen capture of doing that. Here's me starting it up, running as administrator. Here's me entering the command. Here's me after PowerShell activating and it's done. Okay, now I'm ready to install Flask. Pip install Flask. And there she goes. Okay. So pip install Flask is setting up things to within the virtual environment to install the Flask stuff. Okay, I should have Flask. There's a other version of pip. They're telling me, why don't you get up the most recent version of pip. I don't think I have that much permission here, so I'm just going to ignore that. Now, I think we have Flash installed. We're ready to write sort of the hello world of Flash. And I'm going to call that file I'm going to put that file, so make a new file. I'm going to save that new file. I'm going to put it in the venv. That's good. Yeah, that's a good place for it. And I'm going to call it app.py. That's the sort of usual name of these things. I'll start naming them other things or having more than just app, but that's our start. And now I'm going to make this. So I'm going to, from Flask, import Flask. First one small f, the second one's capital F. And then my app is Flask. And this underscore underscore is based on the name of the file. So when I start saying app, I'm going to mean the name of the file, which right now they're both app, but that might change. Okay. And now I'm making what's called a route, which is like basically sort of a URL. And we're just going to make like local routes. So, and this is the default route. So I'm going to open up to a particular local host URL. If you don't know what that means, you'll see in a minute. If you do know what that means, then you know what that means. And why is that like that? Well, we'll see. It's squiggling on me, but switch to a double quote. Oh, it went squiggly, went away. Okay. And now defining hello world, I just make up this name of some function. I'm defining some function. I called it hello world. And now I'm just going to return hello world. So I'm going to create a sort of a URL, and then this is going to be, I'm going to save it, I'll save. This is going to be what's the content on the page. It's going to say hello world. Terribly exciting. Okay. Now we have to run this thing. Now we're not just doing pure Python anymore. We're using Flask within Python. So what I gave you now two methods. I used to use the second method where you figure out, use some sort of drop-down menu and say you want to run Flask rather than just running pure Python. I stopped doing that, and so I put this other method first because it's the method ultimately that I prefer. But you can use the first method, you can use the second method. There are other methods people found in the Spring. This is the one this like command line approach is the one I'm going to be using. So you need to say what the name of my app is by running this command. So I'm down here in the command line. Need to make a bigger command line. So down here in the command line, I'm running this command. There are different ones. I showed you three of them, one for a Mac, one for Windows, and one for like a more generic Linux. And now my app is not hello. My app is app. So I'm just announcing that my Flask application is called app. And then I'm going to go to Flask and run that app. Okay. So tell what app you want to open up in Flask, and then say run it. And I will at least once type run Flask instead of Flask run and stare at 5 minutes and not realize what mistake I'm making, but you say Flask and then run. It gives you a URL down here, http://127.0.0.1:5000/. So you've got two options at this stage. You can open up a browser and direct it to that URL, or you can control click. That's what it's telling here. You can control click on this and it will open a browser. So I'll do the control click. And it likes, this computer's defined to be its default browser is Edge, so that opened up in Edge. And here's the hello world showing in Edge. Let me view the page source. It just says hello world. There's no HTML tags. I didn't say, I just said send it hello world. I didn't say send it H1 tags or anything else. So it's viewing it as HTML, but all it right now is a simple text. But it is HTML, it's on a web page, so we can send it HTML, which is one of our next things. Okay, I'm going to hit a Control-C to stop the browser. This is showing you some of the web traffic that there was, a get me a web page. So it tells you down here some of the stuff that's going on web server wise, because that's what we're doing. This is a server course, not my client course. I'll torture you another time with my client course, but if I haven't already. But this is a server course, so and it's making on the fly, it's making a server and directing that server to the local host, and then we are viewing that. So what you will see is we will write Python. That Python will be executed on the server side, and then if you look at, like I just did, what's the code that you see behind the scenes in HTML, you won't see any of the Python. It will be gone because it's server side. It will have been executed. Okay. Now, why do I like the command line? Here's why I like the command line. Up arrow, there's my Flask run. Up arrow again, there's my command. So up arrow twice, and I'm ready to go again. Up arrow twice, there's Flask. And bring it up. Okay, so if you get used to the command, the first time you enter the command, it's a pain, and you have to, $sign and colons and all that weird stuff. But to rerun the command and maybe edit it is very easy. I could make it app 2, app 3, app 4, very easily switch among apps. The menus are all right, but if you're going to switch from one app to the other, here's his example. Here, I see how his example works. Now let me go over to mine. If you're going to flip back and forth between apps, command line's the way to go. And if you're like leaving this place and you're uncomfortable at the command line, then you haven't educated yourself properly. IT people see more of it than computer science people, but everybody should get some comfort with the command line. All right. And Control-C to stop the server. And okay. So that was hello world of, so there was Flask run, there was the hello world. Here is the other method where you are using this sort of debug thing and choosing Flask. So again, that's a different method, one that I'm not going to use. But and I had students found yet other versions. So any questions on hello world in Flask? Set up a virtual environment, get into that virtual environment, activate it, pip install Flask, write your little hello world program. It's not as trivial as some hello world programs. You're bringing in Flask, you're establishing the name of your app, you're setting up a route, and then it's okay. So as hello worlds go, it's not the easiest hello world. It's not too bad, but it's not the easiest. Okay, this is a video where somebody gets you started with Flask. So I thought he was pretty clear and understandable. So I give you a link to it. I tell you it's not me. All right. So that was one route that said hello world. Now let me do two routes. Okay. So I'm just gonna overwrite it. I'm still gonna call it app. I'm gonna open this guy up and paste it in. Just paste it over what I have here. And save it. Okay, so some comment. There are going to be two routes, two URLs. One, the default localhost URL 127.0.0.1 with a port of 5000. You might have some setting in your Visual Studio Code to change it from 5000. Usually with Flask and Visual Studio, that's usually the default one is 5000, but it can be possibly changed. And the other one's going to be sort of a folder within there called other. So I'm going to make sort of two pages at two slightly related but slightly different URLs. Here I am importing the Flask. Here's the hello world. This is the default route, the home, if you will. And I am returning a bunch of stuff this time. I'm using that multi-line. And I'm sending now just not some simple text, hello world. I'm sending it, emphasizing that it is HTML. So I'm sending it open HTML, close HTML, open head, close head, open body, close body, open title, close title, and H1 and a paragraph. So I'm sending it some little, silly hard-coded web page with some HTML. And here's just another route down here. So some route other than just slash. I give some other function. This name will come up and be important at some point, but right now you just have to make a name. It has to be different than the other name. And I'm sending you a different page with, the same format, but different stuff, some different HTML. Okay. And then I have some stuff down here that's supposed to sort of help me, be able to make changes without closing and opening the browser again and again. So let's see. So I'm going to arrow up. I still have it called app, so I don't have to edit that, and arrow up for Flask run. It gives me my control click URL. And here's my default page. It opened up to my default page. Ahoy there, matey. Whatever should I say here? Okay. And then the other one, and I didn't make any links from one page to the other. I could, but I didn't. But the other page is at a route of other. So where is Edge? There's Edge. I can come up here and type slash and go to that other folder from the home route. And there's my other page. Welcome aboard. Still don't know what I should say here. So that's a different page. So I can go to I can make one web page, I can make two web pages. Now this has, you can tell that this welcome aboard is a header. So it's got some actual HTML structure now. Okay, let me see if I can update it. Let me see if I can change it. So let me save that. See if I can go back to the default router and see if it can be changed yet. What if I refresh? No, I don't know. Supposed to be able to make some changes on the fly, but it's not for me right now. So I'll just move on. All right. If I open a new one, what happens? Still a second. All right. Two routes. The default route. The second route, I'm hard coding HTML and sending it over to those pages. Next version. I'm going to now put the HTML over in a template, so I don't have all that HTML over in my Python. That's my next step. Now I have a template with some HTML files in a template. I'm going to copy that. Find 341 Flask venv, paste that here. I'm overwriting the appy, the Python app, and I added this template folder. Okay. And it updated it in, when I overwrote it, it updated it in Visual Studio Code. Okay. So now I'm bringing in Flask and something about the templates, render template. So I added to the imports. I took my first route and I added, so now this is going to be, this one.html is going to be the default route, but it's also going to be the route if I put in a 1. So I can have two URLs that point to the same page. So if I put in just slash, it will go there. If I put in /1, it will go there. And it will go to one HTML, which is just this, one static page from template. Then I have my second route, and it's going to use render template, and it's going to render 2.html, which is a different page. So now I took the HTML out of my Python and just refer to it. So I have my Python and I just refer it to the HTML. And so it's handling the routing, but it's not writing, the Python's not writing the HTML. The HTML was written, and then I am just sort of using Python to direct things there. Okay, I can stop, run Control C to stop the previous. Two arrows up to name the app as app and Flask run. There's my URL. And it popped up over here in Edge. So here is the default route. 127.001:5000. It's saying the first static page, so it's made this from the template. I can add the 1 to the route, and it's going to the same page. So both of those, the default route and the 1 route, go to that same page. And if I put in 2, it takes me to the other page in my template. So I had one route, then I just wrote text. Then I had one route where I wrote HTML. Then I had 2 routes. Then I wrote HTML. Then I'm moving the HTML to these separate files called templates. But they're still hard coded. They're still just these pages just say what they say, end of story. That's boring. Now I want to get some information onto the page that might somehow vary. It won't vary much. I'm going to read a text file, and then I'm going to get it from the information from the text file. But we're starting to like code the page and have it not just to be a static HTML page. Questions before I show you the last version. And of course, your lab is pretty much like the last version. Change the data for the most part. Any questions before I move on? No. So that was static pages from templates. Now I'm going to pass some data to the templates, and then the pages are going to put that information on the page. So a little bit more dynamic. So extract that. I'm going to take these over, copy them, documents 341, Flask, venv. I'm going to paste it there. So there's app, there's a JSON. Oh, goddamn, open it in Visual Studio. No, don't do that. I have some templates, 1, 2, and flyers. I have this app, and I have a JSON file with some flyers data in it. The app, the new app filled in, overwrote it. Okay. So here we go. There are 4 routes. I bring in Flask, I bring in render template. I'm going to read a JSON file, and I'm going to use some operating system to make sure I'm in the right location. I open and read the JSON file. This is old hat to you guys, except the ones who are behind. Okay, so I have some JSON data, and then I am printing it out. So, but this will print in the terminal, so you will be able to see, because that's a Python print. So that's going to be on the terminal, and you will see the flyers information that I read it. Here's my default route, which is also my 1 route, which takes me to the 1.html page, which was static. Here's my 2 route, which takes me to my 2.html, which was my second route, my second static page. Then I'm going to go to a flyers route, which is going to open up this flyers HTML. But I added a second argument here. I'm sending it some data. So over here, in Python, it's called flyers. But over here, for some reason, I decided to call it players. So when we get over to flyers, the flyers page, it will be referred to as players. And it's going to be that JSON. What does the JSON look like? The JSON is a list of dictionaries, a list of dictionaries. And I'm going to send that list of dictionaries over to flyers HTML. Here's flyers HTML. There's a header, there's a head, and it's end of head. There's a body. Here's an H1 header. And here is some what we call Jinja. This curly percent and this curly down here. This is Jinja code. This is how the players are going to get spread out on the web page. So remember, players was a list. I'm over in Jinja. Do they call it a list? Do they call it array? I don't know. I keep changing the words on me, so I don't know what Jinja calls it, but this is an array or a list or one of those things. And then this is an element of that list, which is a dictionary. So I'm looping over the items in the elements in the player array / list, which is an object or a dictionary, depending on how you talk about it. And I can get the properties. There was a number property, a player property, a height property, a weight property, a birthplace property. I put the name of the player in an H4 tag, and then I have divs for the other two, and then I have a break for some reason. Okay. Let's see what it looks like. So that was over in Python, the printout of the JSON, and there's a lot of too many flyers, but there you can see the end of it is a square bracket. So you can see that it is a list. Overall, it's a list. Control click. And here I am. So this is the default route, which says it's the first static page. Here's that other route taking me to that same page 1. Here's page 2, taking me to a different static page. And then the last route was flyers. And this page is somewhat dynamic. So there it is, flyers, roster, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at what that looks like behind. So view page source. So the Jinja is also sort of executed on the server. So I don't see the Jinja, I just see the result of the Jinja. So I don't see the for loop, I just see after the iteration did its thing, I see the results. Okay. So that was passing information over to a page and using Jinja to display it. And you're just going to do what I did, change the names to protect the innocent. So here's what you have to do. I do flyers, you do sixers. So you have a CSV for the sixers, and what I just read in was a JSON. So there are converters. Here's one of them, and you can take CSV and convert it into JSON. Make yourself a new JSON file for the sixers. You're going to have at least 2 pages, at least 2 routes. So one of them is going to be static, and it's just going to be like an about page. You'll just say, you know, I'm Sue, and this is I'm interested in blah, something about the author. And then the other page is about the sixers. So you're going to read the JSON file you made, and then you are going to, you have to pay attention to what kind of JSON you made. Did you make, was it an object first? Was it an array first? What kind of JSON was it? But you're going to pass that JSON over to a template, and then use some Jinja to display it. And I updated this and then posted the old one. I'm sorry about that, but like this says mad when it should say made, and something else I fixed, but it's basically the same as what I did in spring. You're going to show me some screen captures and your code. So I want you to see that you know how to run it. So send me some screen captures, but also send me your code. So I get to look at your code. Any questions? So that's what you have to do. My last example, just modified. All right. So I will stop recording.